You black boy with the mop. Wrestle me.
Owen didn't look up. Chad snatched the mop and threw it down the hall.
I said wrestle me. You deaf? Nothing? Really?
Chad shoved him. Owen stumbled back, didn't speak, didn't raise his hand.
62 years old. Scrubbing floors for frat boys. And you can't even look me in the eye.
Owen kept his eyes on the floor. Chad slapped $500 on the bucket.
$500. You and me. Wrestling mat. Friday night.
He turned to the crowd. The hallway erupted.
Who wants to see that? Jen.
Owen picked up the mop. No one in that crowd knew that in 48 hours, they would watch their frat king get destroyed by the man they'd just called boy. At 4:45 in the morning, the hallways of Whitmore University belonged to Owen Griffin. Not in any way that mattered. Not in the way the dean owned them, or the alumni donors whose names hung in bronze above every doorway. Owen owned them the way a shadow owns a wall. Present, unnoticed, easily forgotten. He pushed a mop bucket down the second-floor corridor of the Sigma Kappa fraternity house, the wheels squeaking against tiles still sticky with last night's beer. Red Solo cups lined the baseboards like spent shell casings. A torn banner reading, "Chad the Chad," drooped from the ceiling, one corner stapled, the other dangling. Owen picked it up, folded it, set it on the windowsill. Deep lines carved his face like riverbeds cut through stone, and a faded scar crossed the bridge of his nose, so old it had turned the same color as the rest of his dark skin. His frame was lean, almost gaunt, the kind of thin that made people assume fragility. But his hands told a different story. They were thick, calloused, the knuckles slightly enlarged, the fingers wide and deliberate, wrapped around the mop handle with a grip that could crack walnuts. His uniform hung loose, a navy polo 2 sizes too big, faded at the collar and frayed at the cuffs. The security badge clipped to his chest read, "O. Griffin, Night Patrol," in letters half rubbed away. His black shoes had split along the sole months ago. He'd fixed them with super glue, twice. Owen worked his way down the hall, bending to collect a pizza box, a plastic vodka bottle, someone's left shoe. Every movement was quiet, controlled. His feet barely made sound on the wet tile. When he crouched to pick up a shattered glass, he dropped his weight through his hips. Low center of gravity, spine straight, balanced on the balls of his feet, the way a man moves when his body has been trained to fall without breaking. No one saw it. No one ever did. A freshman stumbled out of a bathroom, glanced at Owen, and walked past without a word. Not rude, exactly. Just blind. The way you're blind to a fire hydrant or a parking meter. The hallway smelled like stale beer and cheap cologne. Somewhere upstairs, bass thumped through the floorboards. A door slammed. Laughter. Then silence again. Owen wrung out the mop, dipped it back in the bucket. The water had turned brown an hour ago. He kept working anyway. In the break room, his locker sat in the corner. Dented, the lock rusted. Inside, taped to the back wall where no one would think to look, was a photograph. A young man, dark skin, white uniform, gold medal around his neck, standing on a podium in front of flags. Owen never opened that locker when anyone else was in the room. Chad Hollister woke up at noon on a Tuesday, and the world waited for him. That was how it had always been. The world waited. Teachers waited. Coaches waited. Girls waited. And Chad showed up whenever he felt like it, because people like Chad Hollister didn't operate on anyone else's schedule. He rolled out of a king-sized bed, the only one in the Sigma Kappa house, custom ordered, paid for by his father's credit card. The room smelled like last night's cologne and this morning's protein shake. Trophies lined the shelf above his desk. State wrestling champion junior year. State wrestling champion senior year. A framed photo of Chad pinning an opponent to the mat, arms raised, veins popping, mouth open in a scream of victory. He stood in front of the mirror, 6'2", 220 pounds of muscle packed under golden skin. He flexed once, twice, watched the fibers ripple across his chest. His jaw was square enough to cut paper. His teeth had been bleached 3 times this year. His hair, thick, blonde, pushed back with gel, caught the light like a helmet made of money. He pulled on a white Ralph Lauren polo, the kind that cost more than Owen Griffin's weekly paycheck. Slim fit. The sleeves strained against his biceps. Khaki shorts, Gucci loafers, no socks. An Apple Watch on one wrist, a signet ring on the other, the Sigma Kappa crest, 14-karat gold, handed down from his father, who'd been president of the same chapter 23 years ago. Chad Hollister didn't just belong at Whitmore University. He owned it, or at least his family did. The Hollister Performing Arts Center, the Hollister Athletic Wing. His grandfather's name was on the library. His father sat on the board of trustees. He walked into the dining hall at 12:45. The freshman at the omelet station saw him coming and started cracking eggs before Chad said a word. "More cheese, and don't burn it this time." The kid nodded, hands shaking. Chad took his usual table. Center of the room, 6 chairs, only 3 occupied by brothers who knew better than to sit before he arrived. He ate without looking up, scrolling through his phone, double-tapping Instagram posts from girls who tagged him in their stories. A sophomore walked past carrying a tray. Chad stuck his foot out. The kid stumbled, caught himself, kept walking, didn't say a word. Chad's brothers laughed. Chad didn't even look up from his phone. That was the thing about Chad Hollister. He didn't bully people because he enjoyed it. He bullied people because he'd forgotten there was any other way to exist. Cruelty wasn't a choice for him. It was gravity. It was breathing. It was the only language his father had ever taught him, and he spoke it fluently. After lunch, he walked across the quad. 2 girls waved. A sophomore stepped off the path to let him pass. A janitor, not Owen, a different one, pressed against the wall as Chad's group swept by, 5 wide, taking the whole sidewalk. Chad didn't notice the janitor. He never noticed janitors, or dishwashers, or security guards. They were furniture to him, background noise, things that cleaned and fetched and disappeared when they weren't needed. He checked his phone. The TikTok he'd posted last week, him deadlifting 405 pounds, shirtless, captioned "Built Different," had crossed 300,000 views. He smiled. The world was watching him. What Chad didn't know was that by the end of this week, the world would be watching him for an entirely different reason, and he wouldn't be smiling. Friday night, 11:47 p.m. The backyard of the Sigma Kappa house pulsed with bass so heavy it rattled the windows of the chemistry building 2 blocks away. Red and blue lights swept across 50 drunk faces. A keg stood in the center of the yard like an altar. Smoke from a bonfire curled into the dark sky. Girls danced on a wooden platform someone had dragged out of the basement. Brothers chanted drinking songs on the porch, shirtless, sunburned from an afternoon football game none of them would remember. Chad Hollister stood on a picnic table. He was 3 beers and 2 shots deep, which was exactly the altitude where his ego went from large to planetary. His polo was unbuttoned to the chest. His voice boomed across the yard. 4 years undefeated, state champion. Nobody in this school, nobody in this state can take me down. He flexed, and the crowd roared. Who wants to try? Huh? Any of you? I'll give you 10 seconds on the mat. 10 seconds! A sophomore raised his hand. Chad pointed at him, laughed, and said, "Sit down, Tyler. I'd break you." Tyler sat down. That was when Owen Griffin walked around the corner. He had his flashlight out, radio clipped to his belt, making his nightly rounds. The music hit him first, a wall of sound that made his chest vibrate. Then the smell, beer and sweat and burning wood. He crossed the yard, heading for the speaker system. University policy, noise curfew, 11 p.m. He'd given them 47 extra minutes already. "Excuse me," Owen said, wrestling for the speaker cable. "It's past curfew. I need you to—" "Don't touch that." Chad jumped off the table. The crowd parted. He walked toward Owen with his arms spread wide, his chest out, his chin up, the way a man walks when he wants you to know how much bigger he is than you. "The hell you think you're going, old man?" Owen held up the radio. "Just doing my job. Noise curfew was 45 minutes ago." "Your job." Chad spat the words like something rotten. "Your job is to stay out of my way. You hear me? You're 60 years old. You're cleaning up after kids, and you think you get to tell me when to stop my party?" Owen lowered the radio. "I'm asking politely." Chad stepped closer. Close enough that Owen could smell the bourbon on his breath. Close enough to count the veins in Chad's neck. "You know what I think? I think you need a reminder of where you stand. Arm wrestle me." "No, thank you." "Arm wrestle me, old man. Right now. Or I'll make sure you're mopping bathrooms for the rest of the semester." Owen looked at Chad for a long time. Then he sat down at the picnic table, put his elbow up, and opened his hand. It lasted 4 seconds. Owen let Chad win. He didn't resist, just let his arm go down slowly, like a door closing on its own. Chad slammed Owen's fist into the wood and threw both arms up. "That's what I thought. You see that? Old man's got nothing." The crowd cheered. Chad soaked it in. But the buzz faded fast. Beating a 62-year-old security guard at arm wrestling, that wasn't a story, that was nothing. Chad needed more. "You know what? Forget arm wrestling." He shoved Owen's shoulder. Owen rocked back, but didn't fall. "Let's wrestle, real wrestling, right here on this grass, you and me." "I don't think that's a good idea, son." "There it is again. Son, you keep calling me that like you're somebody." Chad shoved harder. This time Owen stumbled back 2 steps. "You're nobody. You hear me? You're a nobody in a uniform that doesn't even fit." Owen's eyes didn't change. His breathing didn't change. But something in his posture shifted, a stillness that settled over his body like a coat. The kind of stillness that comes from years of training your muscles to stay quiet until the exact right moment. "Go home, kid," Owen said. Chad shoved him a 3rd time. Owen hit the ground. His flashlight rolled across the grass. The crowd went silent. Owen looked up from the ground. He didn't look angry. He didn't look scared. He looked like a man doing math, calculating something only he could see. He stood up, brushed off his pants, picked up his flashlight, and walked away. Owen didn't go home after his shift. He sat in the break room for 40 minutes, staring at the wall. The fluorescent light above him buzzed and flickered. A coffee machine gurgled in the corner, half broken, leaking water onto the counter in a slow drip that nobody had fixed in 3 months. His hands were folded on the table, perfectly still. But if you looked closely, you'd see the tendons moving beneath the skin. Tiny contractions, like a man squeezing something invisible. Earl Dawson walked in at 5:30 a.m., 6 minutes before his shift started, the way he always did. Earl was the other night shift security guard, 67, bad knee, glasses held together with electrical tape. He'd worked at Whitmore for 11 years, which made him the senior man, even though Owen had been there for 9. "You look like hell," Earl said. Owen didn't answer. Earl poured himself a cup of coffee, grimaced at the taste, and sat down across from Owen. He'd known Owen long enough to understand that silence wasn't rudeness. It was just Owen. The man could go an entire 8-hour shift without saying more than 20 words. "Heard about the party," Earl said. "The Hollister kid?" Owen looked up. "Word travels fast." "This campus has more gossip than a beauty salon." Earl sipped his coffee. "You okay?" "I'm fine." "You don't look fine." Owen's jaw tightened, then relaxed. "He pushed me down, Earl, in front of all of them, and they laughed." Earl set his mug down. He studied Owen's face the way a mechanic studies an engine, looking for the thing that's about to break. "You didn't hit him?" "No." "Good." Owen stood up and walked to his locker. He turned his back to Earl, always did every time he opened it, and dialed the combination. The door creaked open. Inside, taped to the back wall, was the photograph. Black and white, creased at the corners, the tape yellowed and peeling. A young man, mid-20s, dark skin gleaming with sweat, white judogi, crisp and clean, a gold medal hanging from his neck, heavy, real, catching the flash of a camera. Behind him, the Olympic rings, 5 colors, Seoul, 1988. The young man's face was calm, not smiling, not celebrating, just calm, the way a man looks when he's done the thing he was born to do. Owen stared at the photograph for a long time. Earl had seen it once, years ago. He'd asked about it. Owen had said, "That was a different life," and closed the locker. Earl never asked again. But Earl remembered other things. Small things that didn't add up until they did. The time a drunk freshman had rushed the dormitory entrance at 2 a.m. swinging a baseball bat. Owen had stepped inside the swing, caught the kid's wrist, and twisted. The bat hit the floor. The kid hit the floor. Owen hadn't moved his feet. The whole thing took less than a second. The time a contractor had dropped a 200-pound filing cabinet on the staircase. Owen had caught it mid-fall with one arm extended. The contractor had stared at him. Owen had shrugged and said, "It's not that heavy." The time Earl had watched Owen walk across an icy parking lot in January, every other guard was sliding and grabbing handrails. Owen walked straight through it without breaking stride, his feet finding traction on surfaces that didn't seem to have any. Like his body understood balance the way a fish understands water. "Owen," Earl said. Owen closed the locker, turned around. "That boy doesn't know who you are, does he?" Owen put his hands in his pockets. "Nobody does. Maybe it's time somebody did." Owen looked at Earl for a long moment. Something moved behind his eyes. Not anger, not pride. Something older. Something that had been sleeping for a very long time and was starting to wake up. "Good night, Earl," Owen said. He walked out of the break room, down the hallway, past the tile he'd mopped 3 hours ago. His footsteps were silent. His posture was straight. And for the first time in 9 years, he didn't hunch his shoulders when he walked through the front door. The morning sun hit his face. He squinted, kept walking. Behind him, Earl stood at the window, watching. He shook his head slowly and whispered to no one in particular. Lord have mercy on that boy. By Monday morning, the whole campus knew. Not because anyone cared about Owen Griffin. Nobody cared about Owen Griffin. They knew because Chad Hollister made sure they knew. The posters went up before sunrise. Someone, probably Tyler, who did whatever Chad told him to do, had printed 50 copies on bright yellow paper and stapled them to every bulletin board, every lamppost, every bathroom stall in every building on campus. Old Man Griffin versus Chad the Chad Hollister. Friday night, 8 p.m., Sigma Kappa backyard. State champion versus campus janitor. Bring your cameras. Owen saw the first one on his way to the break room Tuesday morning. It was taped to the door. Someone had drawn a stick figure with a mop next to a muscular figure flexing. Underneath, in Sharpie, R.I.P. Grandpa. He peeled it off, folded it, put it in his pocket. By Wednesday, there were TikToks. Chad had filmed himself in the Sigma Kappa gym, shirtless, shadow wrestling, cutting promos like a WWE villain. This Friday, I'm going to show the whole campus what happens when a washed-up old man steps to a real athlete. He shadowboxed the camera. Owen Griffin, security guard, 62 years old. Probably can't touch his toes, and he thinks he can last 10 seconds with me. The video hit 200,000 views in 2 days. The comments were a cesspool. Bros fighting a senior citizen. Grandpa's gonna need a wheelchair after this. Chad by first round KO no cap. Owen didn't have TikTok. He didn't need it. The students told him everything. Hey champ, you ready for Friday? A kid in a backward cap, grinning, holding his phone up as Owen emptied a trash can outside the library. Owen said nothing, kept working. Yo, Mr. Griffin, can I get a pre-fight interview? Another one, laughing, jogging alongside Owen as he pushed his cart across the quad. Owen said nothing, kept working. You know he's gonna kill you, right? Like actually kill you. A girl leaning against a wall, not laughing, almost concerned. Almost. Owen said nothing. On Thursday morning, Owen went to his supervisor's office. Mr. Pemberton sat behind a desk covered in papers he pretended to read. He was a small man with a large title, Director of Campus Safety, and he wielded it the way small men always do, carefully, fearfully, and never against anyone who mattered. I need to file a harassment complaint, Owen said. Pemberton didn't look up. Against who? Chad Hollister. Pemberton looked up. Then he looked back down. Owen, the kid's just having fun. You know how these fraternity boys are. He put posters of me all over campus. He's filming videos mocking me. He physically pushed me to the ground last Friday. Pemberton tapped his pen on the desk. The Hollisters are important to this university, Owen. You understand that, don't you? His father sits on the board. Owen stared at him. So nothing. I'm saying let it blow over. Boys will be boys. Owen stood up. He didn't slam the door. He didn't raise his voice. He walked out the same way he walked in. Quiet, controlled, invisible. But something had cracked, not broken. Cracked. The kind of crack that lets light in. Thursday night, 9 p.m. Owen was mopping the second floor of the science building when he heard footsteps. Heavy, fast, deliberate. Chad rounded the corner with 4 of his brothers. All of them had their phones out. All of them were recording. "There he is, the challenger!" Chad's voice echoed off the tile walls. He spread his arms wide. "You ready for tomorrow, old man? You been training? Doing push-ups in the broom closet?" His brothers laughed. One of them made monkey noises. Another one whispered "World Star" into his phone. Owen kept mopping. Chad walked closer, right up to the bucket. He looked down at Owen with the kind of smile that isn't a smile. The kind that says, "I own you and we both know it." "Tell you what." Chad reached into his back pocket and pulled out a wad of cash. He counted $500 bills, slowly, one at a time, holding each one up to the light, and slapped them down on top of Owen's mop bucket. $500, winner takes all. He leaned in close enough for Owen to see the capillaries in his eyes. "That's a month's salary for you, isn't it? Maybe 2? Come on, Pops, take the money. Give the people what they want." Owen looked at the bills sitting on his bucket, wet, crumpled against the metal edge. $500 that meant nothing to Chad Hollister, and everything to a man who glued his shoes back together twice a year. He didn't pick them up. He set the mop against the wall, straightened his back, looked Chad directly in the eyes, not up at him, not around him, but into him. The first time he'd done that since the night of the party. "Friday," Owen said. His voice was low, steady. The kind of voice that doesn't need volume. 8 o'clock. Chad blinked. For half a second, less than half, something flickered across his face. Not fear. Not yet. But the faintest recognition that the man standing in front of him was not the man he'd been performing for. Then it was gone. Chad grinned, snatched the money back. "Friday it is, old man. Don't forget your wheelchair." He walked away. His brothers followed, hooting and filming. Owen stood alone in the hallway. The fluorescent light buzzed above him. The mop dripped onto the tile. He picked it up, finished the floor, but he didn't hunch his shoulders. Not anymore. Owen's apartment sat on the 3rd floor of a building that smelled like boiled cabbage and old carpet. 1 bedroom, 1 bathroom, a kitchen the size of a closet. Rent was $680 a month, which was exactly half of what Whitmore University paid him after taxes. He'd lived there for 9 years. The walls were bare except for 2 things. A framed photo of his wife, Linda, taken at Coney Island in 1994. She was laughing, her hair blowing sideways, a hot dog in one hand, and a calendar from the local hardware store that was still turned to March even though it was October. Linda had been gone 5 years. Cancer. The slow kind. The kind that lets you watch. Owen sat on the edge of his bed. It was 6 p.m. Friday, 2 hours before the thing he'd agreed to do, and he still wasn't sure why he'd agreed to do it. He reached under the bed and pulled out a wooden box. Oak, heavy. The hinges were brass, tarnished green. He'd built it himself in 1989, the year after Soul, to hold the things he didn't want to look at but couldn't throw away. He opened it. The Judoka was on top. White cotton, folded with military precision, the creases still sharp after decades in the dark. He lifted it out. The fabric was heavier than he remembered. Or maybe his arms were lighter. Beneath it, the black belt, 6th Dan. The silk was worn smooth where his hands had tied it 10,000 times. The kanji embroidered at one end had faded to gray, and beneath that, the metal. He picked it up, It was heavier than people expected. Solid. Cold. The ribbon was faded, once bright, now the color of old teeth. He turned it over in his palm. Seoul, 1988. His name engraved on the back in letters so small you needed reading glasses to see them. He hadn't needed reading glasses in 1988. Owen stood up and walked to the bathroom mirror. He held the judogi against his chest. The man in the mirror was 62. Sunken cheeks, gray stubble, neck tendons showing through the skin like cables, the scar on his nose, the deep lines around his mouth. He didn't look like an Olympic champion. He looked like a man who mopped floors. He put the judogi on anyway. It fit. Not the way it had fit in Seoul, snug across broad shoulders, tight at the waist, the uniform of a man in his prime. It fit the way a second skin fits, loose in some places, tight in others, but fundamentally right. His body had changed. The judogi hadn't. And somehow, standing in his bathroom in a third-floor apartment that smelled like cabbage, wearing the same uniform he'd worn on the podium in front of 60,000 people, he felt something he hadn't felt in years. He felt like himself. Owen tied the belt. His hands remembered the knot before his brain did. Left over right, pull tight, tuck under. He'd done it so many times that his fingers moved on autopilot, the way a pianist's fingers find the keys in the dark. He stood in the living room, pushed the coffee table against the wall, and for the first time in 9 years, he moved. Tai sabaki, body rotation, feet sliding on the carpet, hips turning, shoulders following, smooth, silent. The movement of a man whose muscles had memorized a language his mind had tried to forget. Ukemi, breakfall. He dropped to the floor, slapped the carpet with his palm, rolled, and came up standing. His knee clicked, his back protested. But the form was clean, textbook. He did it again, and again, each time smoother, each time faster. The apartment was small, and the ceiling was low and the carpet was thin, but none of that mattered. His body was remembering. His phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. He walked over. The screen read, "Sophie." He answered, "Hey, sweetheart." "Dad." His daughter's voice was tight, worried. "Please tell me you're not actually doing this." "I'm doing it." "Dad, he's 21. He's twice your size. You're 62 years old." Owen looked at himself in the hallway mirror. The judo guy, the belt, the old man wearing both. "I'll be fine, Sophie." "Why? Why are you doing this?" Owen was quiet for a moment. Then, "Because I need to remember something." "Remember what?" He looked at the medal sitting on the bed. Gold. Cold. Real. Who I am. He hung up, put the phone down, walked to the front door. 2 hours. 8 o'clock. Friday night. Owen Griffin was going to the mat. They built the ring out of gym mats. 4 thick blue mats dragged from the Whitmore Athletic Center, laid end-to-end on the grass behind the Sigma Kappa house. Someone had strung Christmas lights along the fence. Someone else had set up 2 portable speakers blasting entrance music, the kind of bass-heavy hip-hop that rattles your teeth. A sophomore from the film school had mounted his camera on a tripod near the porch. 2 more were live streaming on Instagram. By 7:45, there were over 300 people. They stood in a wide circle around the mats, 3 and 4 rows deep. Freshmen in the front, sitting cross-legged on the grass. Upperclassmen behind them, standing, drinks in hand. A group of girls from Delta Gamma sat on the porch railing, legs dangling. 2 professors stood at the back of the crowd, Dr. Whitfield from the kinesiology department, and Dr. Ramirez from sociology. They told themselves they were there to supervise. They weren't. They were there because everyone was there. The air smelled like cut grass and cheap beer and the particular electricity that gathers when 300 people are waiting for something to happen. Someone had made a betting board on a whiteboard propped against the fence. The odds were written in red marker. Chad, 50-1 favorite Owen. Prayers accepted. At 5 minutes to 8, Chad Hollister made his entrance. He came through the back door of the Sigma Kappa house, flanked by 6 brothers, all of them shirtless, all of them chanting his name. Chad! 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 The crowd picked it up. 300 voices. The sound bounced off the buildings and echoed across the empty quad. Chad stepped onto the mats. He wore a crimson and black wrestling singlet, custom-made, his name stitched across the back in gold thread. His body gleamed, oiled, every muscle defined, every vein visible, like an anatomy chart that had learned to walk. He bounced on his toes, rolled his neck, cracked his knuckles one at a time. He raised both fists and the crowd roared. He looked like a god. He knew it. Everyone knew it. Then he stood in the center of the mat and waited, arms crossed, smiling. 8 o'clock came. Owen didn't. 8:01. Nothing. 8:02. The crowd started murmuring. He's not coming. Told you. Old man chickened out. Chad cupped his hands around his mouth. Where's my janitor? Somebody go check the broom closet. Laughter, but nervous laughter. The kind that fills the space when people don't know what's supposed to happen next. 8:04. A ripple at the edge of the crowd, someone pointing, heads turning. Owen Griffin walked across the quad. He was alone. No entrance music, no entourage, no chanting. Just a 62-year-old man walking across a dark lawn with his hands in his pockets and his security jacket zipped up to the chin. The crowd parted. Not out of respect, out of curiosity. The way you'd part for a stray dog that wandered into a restaurant. Owen stepped onto the mat. He looked small under the Christmas lights. His security jacket hung off his shoulders like a blanket on a clothesline. His black shoes, the ones with the glued soles, left faint prints on the blue surface. Chad looked him up and down, grinned. That's what you're wearing, old man? You gonna mop the mat too? His brothers howled. Owen didn't answer. He stood at the edge of the mat and unzipped his jacket. Slowly, one tooth at a time, the jacket came off. Underneath was a Judoka, pure white, crisp cotton. The kind of white that doesn't come from a store. The kind that comes from being folded in a box for 30 years and never touched. It hung on Owen's lean frame like a flag on a pole, but the cut was unmistakable. Competition grade, international standard, and the belt. Black, 6th Dan. The silk was worn smooth, the edges frayed, the kanji faded to gray. But it was tied perfectly. Left over right, tucked under, tight against the hips. The knot of a man who had tied it 10,000 times. The crowd went quiet. Not silent, quiet. The difference is important. Silent is when nobody speaks. Quiet is when everybody wants to speak but doesn't know what to say. Chad's smile didn't disappear, but it froze. The kind of freeze that happens when the brain receives information it doesn't know how to process. He stared at the belt, at the Judoka, at the old man who suddenly didn't look so old anymore. Nice costume, Grandpa, Chad said, but his voice had changed, just slightly, just enough. A student in the front row, a junior named Alex who'd taken 3 years of judo in high school, leaned to the girl next to him and whispered, "That's a 6th Dan belt." Do you know how many people in the country have a 6th Dan belt? How many? Not many. Owen stepped to his spot on the mat. He didn't bounce. He didn't stretch. He didn't crack his knuckles or roll his neck or do anything that Chad had done. He just stood. Feet shoulder-width apart, hands at his sides, weight centered. Still. Balanced. Ready. A sophomore who'd volunteered as referee walked to the center of the mat. He looked at Chad. He looked at Owen. He swallowed hard. Rules are simple. Submission, pin, or forfeit. Ready? Chad dropped into a wrestler's crouch. Wide base, hands forward, chin tucked. His muscles coiled. His eyes locked onto Owen like a predator sighting prey. Owen stood upright, relaxed, his hands open, his breathing even. He looked like a man waiting for a bus. The referee raised his hand. Go! Chad exploded off the line. 220 pounds of muscle launched forward in a wrestler's double-leg takedown, head low, arms reaching, feet driving into the mat like pistons. It was fast, violent. The kind of opening that had pinned 37 opponents in 2 years of state competition. The kind of opening that didn't leave room for thinking. Owen wasn't there. He stepped to the left, 1 step, maybe 2, and Chad's arms closed around nothing. The momentum carried Chad forward, stumbling, his hands hitting the mat where Owen's legs had been a half-second earlier. He scrambled up, face red, and turned around. Owen hadn't moved his hands. They were still at his sides. The crowd murmured. A few people laughed, but this time they weren't laughing at Owen. Chad reset. Wider stance, lower center of gravity. He circled right, testing, looking for an angle. Owen turned with him, not circling, rotating. His feet barely left the mat. His hips stayed square. His eyes never blinked. Chad shot again. Faster this time. Lower. A single-leg attempt, reaching for Owen's left knee. Owen's hand came down. Not a punch, not a block. A grip. His fingers closed around Chad's right wrist, and his left hand caught the collar of Chad's singlet. In one motion, smooth, fluid, mechanical, Owen turned his hip into Chad's center of gravity, loaded the younger man's weight onto his right side, and swept Chad's front leg with the back of his calf. Osotogari, major outer reap. The first throw any judoka learns, the last throw most opponents see. Chad went airborne, not far, maybe 2 feet, but the rotation was violent. His back hit the mat with a sound like a car door slamming. The air left his lungs in a single grunt. His eyes went wide, his hands grabbed at nothing. 300 people heard the impact. 299 of them had never heard anything like it. Owen stepped back, hands at his sides again, breathing normal. The crowd was stunned, not cheering, not booing, just stunned. The kind of collective silence that happens when reality deviates from the script everyone had agreed on. Chad got up, slowly. He rolled to one side, pushed himself to his knees, and stood. His face was a color that didn't have a name, somewhere between red and purple, somewhere between fury and confusion. A bruise was already forming on his left shoulder blade. He looked at Owen. Owen looked back. Lucky, Chad said. His voice was hoarse. He charged. No technique this time, just rage. Both arms wide, going for a bear hug, trying to use his weight advantage the way big men always do when skill stops working. Owen caught Chad's right arm at the elbow. His left hand gripped the back of Chad's neck. He stepped across Chad's body with his right foot, planted it between Chad's legs, and drove his hip upward. Uchimata, inner thigh throw, one of the most beautiful techniques in all of martial arts. Chad's feet left the ground. His body rotated over Owen's hip, not forward but upward and over, like a wheel turning on an axle. For a moment, he was completely inverted, his head pointing at the grass, his legs pointing at the Christmas lights. Then gravity did what gravity does. He hit the mat face first. The sound was worse than the first time. A girl in the front row covered her eyes. Someone whispered, "Oh my God," and meant it. Owen stood over him, not gloating, not posing, just standing. His judoka had shifted slightly on his shoulders. He straightened it with one hand. Chad lay on the mat for 5 seconds. 10. He pushed himself up on shaking arms. His lip was split. Grass stained his singlet. His eyes were glassy, unfocused, the way eyes look when the brain is still catching up to what the body just experienced. The crowd was no longer silent. They were electric, phones everywhere, flashlights. Someone was screaming. Someone else was chanting Owen's name. Just one person at first, then 2, then 10. Chad stood up. He swayed. He looked at Owen with something new in his eyes. Not fear, not yet, but the understanding that he was in a fight he could not win. The understanding came slowly, like water rising. He charged one last time. Everything he had. A desperate double leg, arms wrapped tight around Owen's waist, driving forward with his legs, trying to take Owen down through sheer force. Owen sprawled, hips dropping, weight sinking, and stopped Chad's drive dead. Then his hands moved. Right hand gripped Chad's collar. Left hand gripped Chad's sleeve at the elbow. He loaded Chad's weight onto his back, bent his knees, and pulled. Ippon Sioi Nage, one-arm shoulder throw. The throw that had won Owen Griffin a gold medal in Seoul in 1988. The throw that had ended the final match in 4 minutes and 12 seconds. The throw that 3 judges had scored as a perfect ippon, full point, match over, no debate. Chad flew. There was no other word for it. His body left the mat, crossed over Owen's shoulder in a high arc, and crashed down on the other side with a force that shook the ground beneath 300 pairs of feet. The mat buckled. The Christmas lights swayed. Someone's drink fell off the fence. Chad lay on his back. His chest heaved. His eyes stared straight up at the dark sky. He didn't move. He didn't try to move. His body had received a message his brain was still translating. "You are done." Owen stood over him, breathing slightly harder now. The first sign of exertion he'd shown all night. He straightened his belt, adjusted his collar, looked down at Chad the way a teacher looks at a student who just failed an exam he should have studied for. At the edge of the crowd, Dr. Tom Whitfield had his phone in his hand. His mouth was open. His glasses had slid down his nose. He was staring at Owen with the expression of a man who'd just seen a ghost, because in a way, he had. He typed a name into Google. The result loaded in half a second. Owen Griffin, born 1964, Baltimore, Maryland. United States Olympic Judo Team, 1988. Gold medalist, 71-kilogram division, Seoul Olympics. 3-time Pan American champion, NCAA champion, Howard University, 1985, 1986. Inducted into the USA Judo Hall of Fame 2002. Whitfield turned his phone to the student next to him. Then that student showed the next one, and the next. The information moved through the crowd like fire through dry grass. Within 60 seconds, Every person in that backyard knew. The chanting started at the back and rolled forward like a wave. "Owen! Owen! Owen!" Owen Griffin stood on a gym mat in the backyard of a fraternity house, wearing a judogi he hadn't put on in 30 years, listening to 300 strangers scream his name. He didn't smile. He didn't raise his fists. He didn't do anything. He just stood there, perfectly still, the way he'd stood on the podium in Seoul, the way he'd stood in every hallway of every building he'd ever mopped. Still, balanced, present. Only this time, everyone could see him. The crowd didn't leave for 40 minutes. They stood in clusters on the grass, phones glowing in the dark, scrolling through Owen Griffin's Wikipedia page, his Olympic highlights, a grainy YouTube video from 1988 that showed a young black man in a white judogi throwing a Soviet competitor so hard the commentator screamed in 3 languages. That's him. That's the same guy. The security guard? The security guard. Owen had already left. He'd picked up his jacket from the edge of the mat, zipped it up over his judogi, clipped his radio back to his belt, and walked across the quad without saying a word. No victory lap, no interview, no acknowledgement that anything had happened at all. He clocked out at 8:47 p.m., 47 minutes into his shift, the only early clock out in 9 years of employment. Chad Hollister sat on the mat for a long time after everyone else had started to leave. His singlet was stained with grass and sweat. His lip had stopped bleeding, but his left shoulder throbbed with every heartbeat. His brothers stood a few feet away, quiet for the first time all semester. None of them knew what to say. None of them had ever seen Chad lose. None of them had ever seen Chad look like this. Not angry, not humiliated, but emptied. Like someone had opened a valve and let everything out. Tyler, the one who'd hung the posters, walked over. "Bro, you okay?" Chad didn't answer. By midnight, the videos were everywhere. The first one, filmed from the porch, shaky, vertical, hit 500,000 views on TikTok before sunrise. The title was simple: Security Guard versus Frat Boy. Wait for it. The comment section exploded. Bro got thrown into next semester. That man moved like water. What the actual... Google Owen Griffin right now. Right now. He's an Olympic gold medalist. Are you kidding me? Chad fumbled the entire bag on national television. By Saturday morning, #SecurityGuardJudo was trending. By Saturday afternoon, it was the #1 trending topic in the United States. Local news picked it up first, then ESPN, then CNN. Frat star challenges campus security guard to wrestling match. Doesn't know he's an Olympic judoka. The headline wrote itself. Owen didn't see any of it. He didn't have TikTok. He didn't watch the news. He went home, hung his judogi back in the wooden box, slid it under the bed, and slept until noon on Saturday, the longest he'd slept since Linda died. When he came back to work Saturday night, something was different. A freshman held the door open for him. Not because she recognized him from the videos, because 2 other students were standing behind her, and one of them whispered, "That's him. That's Coach Griffin." Coach. Nobody had called him that in 30 years. Owen walked to the break room. Earl was already there, drinking his terrible coffee, grinning so wide his glasses nearly fell off. "You son of a bitch," Earl said. "Olympic gold medalist. 9 years I've been sitting across from you and you never once." "It never came up," Owen said. Earl laughed. It was the kind of laugh that fills a room. Sunday morning. 7 a.m. Owen was mopping the science building when he heard footsteps. Not heavy this time. Not fast, slow, hesitant. The footsteps of someone who wasn't sure they should be there. Chad Hollister came around the corner. He was alone. No brothers, no phones, no singlet, just jeans and a plain t-shirt and a paper cup of coffee from the campus cafe. He looked smaller without his entourage, younger. His left eye had a faint bruise underneath it that he hadn't bothered to cover. He stopped 10 feet from Owen, stood there, swallowed. "Mr. Griffin." Owen looked up, kept mopping. "Mr. Griffin, I came to say I'm sorry." Owen stopped mopping. He looked at Chad, really looked at him. Not the way he'd looked at him on the mat. That was assessment, calculation, the eyes of a competitor. This was different. This was the way a man looks at a boy who just realized he's been a boy. "I'm sorry for the things I said. I'm sorry I pushed you. I'm sorry for the posters and the videos and all of it. I'm sorry." Owen was quiet for a long moment. "That took guts," Owen said. "Come in here alone." Chad looked at the floor. "Can I ask you something?" "Go ahead." "Can you teach me?" Owen leaned the mop against the wall. He pulled a chair out from under the break room table and pushed it toward Chad. "Sit down." 6 months later, the backyard of the Sigma Kappa house looked exactly the same. Same fence, same porch, same grass, a little greener now that spring had come. But on Saturday afternoons, the grass was covered with gym mats, and the mats were covered with students. Owen Griffin taught a free self-defense class every Saturday from 2 to 4 p.m., open to everyone. No experience required, no sign-up sheet. Just show up, bring water, and be ready to fall. He wore the same Judoka, the same belt, the same black shoes. New ones this time, paid for by a GoFundMe that a senior named Alex had started without Owen's permission. It raised $47,000 in 3 days. Owen kept enough for the shoes. He donated the rest to the university's financial aid fund. The class started with 12 students. By the 3rd week, it was 40. By the 2nd month, there was a waiting list. Owen taught the way he'd been taught, patient, precise, relentless. He corrected grips with hands that were gentle for the first time in years. He demonstrated break falls on a body that protested every single one but never refused. He bowed before every session and after every session, and within 2 weeks, every student bowed back without being told. Chad Hollister stood at the edge of the mat every Saturday, holding pads, setting up drills, fetching water. Not because Owen asked him to, because he showed up the 2nd Saturday and said, "Put me to work." He'd quit Sigma Kappa, moved out of the house, let the signet ring sit in a drawer. He still had the body of a wrestler, but his eyes were different now. Quieter. The way eyes get when they've seen something they can't unsee. Dr. Whitfield offered Owen an adjunct position in the kinesiology department. Owen turned it down. "I'm not a professor," he said. "I'm a security guard who knows how to throw people." But the university gave him a new title anyway, not officially, not on paper, just in the way people spoke about him. Coach Griffin. Mr. Pemberton, the same Mr. Pemberton who'd said boys will be boys, now referred to Owen as our Olympic champion in every campus tour he gave to prospective parents. Owen never corrected him. He also never forgave him. Some things don't need to be said. On a Tuesday morning in April, at 4:45 a.m., Owen pushed his mop bucket down the 2nd-floor corridor of the Sigma Kappa house. The tiles were sticky with last night's beer. Red Solo cups lined the baseboards. A banner drooped from the ceiling. He picked it up, folded it, set it on the windowsill. A freshman came out of the bathroom. She saw Owen, stopped. "Morning, coach." Owen nodded. "Morning." She walked away. Owen kept mopping. The hallway was quiet. The fluorescent light buzzed. The mop bucket squeaked. Everything was the same. And nothing was the same. Owen Griffin was still invisible to most of the world. He still mopped floors. He still glued his shoes when they broke. He still went home to an empty apartment that smelled like cabbage and old carpet. But he didn't hunch his shoulders anymore. And when he looked in the mirror, he didn't see a janitor wearing a uniform that didn't fit. He saw an Olympic champion who chose to mop floors. And there is a difference. There is a world of difference.